Do I really need to do a cold opening for these videos anymore? I mean, I'm kind of over that. Hello, Internet. This is Olin from What I'm Listening To. I hope you are all doing well. Right, it has been some time since I've made a video. Kind of got caught up with my life and whatnot, but I'll spare you all the details from that because that's not why we're here. We are here because I have a lot of CDs that I would like to talk about, and I have been getting the itch to make more videos and dive into more projects relating to making videos. So I've decided, let's go for it. Once again, I'm gonna try to batch record a bunch of videos so I can actually post some stuff within the next couple weeks. We'll see how that goes. But let's waste no more time. Let's dive into CDs that I have acquired that I am very excited to talk about and share with you all. So to kick things off, the first CD I have for you today, this is Snot's very first album. I have been in a major nu metal kick lately, and if any of you know me, you know that I love the genre. I have loved this kind of music since I was in high school, but there have been a lot of classic nu metal bands that I just missed out on during the heyday of my nu metal fixation. So now that I'm in my 30s, I am going back and exploring all those said albums because I figured better late than never, and this was one of them. Snot's actually kind of an interesting band because compared to a lot of the other nu metal acts like Korn and Slipknot, Snot is more on the hardcore punk side of things. Like literally, there's songs on this album that are just flat out more punk than they are nu metal. But like a lot of metal bands that came up in the mid to late 90s, they kind of got lumped into the nu metal umbrella because I think critics just didn't really know how to categorize bands like these, so they just said nu metal. And whether or not you agree with the fact that Snot is deserving of that nu metal label, it's reached the point now where it doesn't really matter and they are just widely known as nu metal. As far as the band's discography goes, this is really the only true album that they put out. Their original vocalist was this guy named Lynn Straight, who tragically passed away in 1998 because he was killed in a car accident. The band did release a follow-up to this album, but instead each song had a different person singing lead vocals, mostly people who the band were friends with or came about in the same scene as them. I saw somewhere that they were making new material, which is kind of a weird thing to think about. Who knows if that is true, but all I know is this album is phenomenal. At this point, it's legendary in nu metal. If for whatever reason you are exploring the genre, then I highly recommend checking this one out. Again, it's more on the punk funk side of nu metal, but still interesting nonetheless. Staying on the topic of nu metal, next up, this is a compilation. This is called Loud Rocks. This is actually something that I've been trying to get for a very long time, and it took until pretty recently for me to finally get a CD copy of this. When I was a teenager, and again in the heyday of my nu metal fandom, I was really into the band System of a Down, and I especially loved their cover of Wu-Tang Clan's Shame. Because also back in that time, I really wasn't a big fan of hip-hop. I just thought it wasn't as cool as rock, punk, and metal. But what I did really like was the fusion of metal and hip-hop, which is essentially what everything on this album is. So just to read some of the collabs on here, we have System of a Down and Wu-Tang Clan doing Shame, which, again, phenomenal song. But we also have acts like Sugar Ray and the Alcoholics, Static X and Dead Prez, Everlast and Mobb Deep, Crazy Town and the Alcoholics, Seven Dust and Exhibit, Incubus and Big Pun. Just so many token 90s rock acts with token 90s hip-hop acts coming together to make music. It probably hasn't aged very well because it sounds so dated, but I don't care. Every time I hear stuff off this compilation, it just makes me so happy. So whether you're a nu metal fan or a hip-hop fan or just really a fan of 90s music regardless of the genre, this is a compilation worth exploring. Again, don't go into it expecting some kind of artistic beauty. Go into it as if you were watching like a reality show. It's not good, but it's fun to listen to. Still on the topic of nu metal, next up I have an album by a band called Cane Hill. Now it's interesting to see because nu metal is still a genre that exists to this very day. And I don't mean a new crop of teenagers discovering old nu metal albums and popularizing them today. I mean there are new bands that are doing nu metal. So in my recent obsession with nu metal, not only am I exploring old classics that I missed out on, I'm also exploring new nu metal bands. At some point, I would like to do a video profiling some of my findings, but that is for another time. This band is easily one of my favorite nu metal bands. Kind of a mouthful to say. When I heard the song Too Far Gone, which is the opening track on this album, I was obsessed.
Are you mad now? That I'm too far gone? Are you mad that you can't be?
Naturally, I had to seek out the album that it was on, and when I heard the rest of it, I was just instantly in love. My second favorite song off of here is Singing in the Swamp, which to me reminds me so much of the bands that I used to listen to obsessively in high school. I'm a sucker for heavy music with a bit of a melody, which is exactly what this band does. They have several other albums in their discography, which I admittedly haven't explored as much as I have with this one, but I can safely say I'm a fan of theirs, and it just makes me so excited to see that there are bands out there that are still doing nu metal. Again, I'm well into my 30s, but you know what? I still like the genre, and I cannot help myself but to listen to this stuff. Alright, let's stray away from nu metal and move on to something else. Next up, I have a CD by a band called Olla Podrida. Now this is yet another adolescent favorite of mine, which is funny because the kind of music that's on here is not the kind of stuff I was listening to. Olla Podrida's music is, I guess you could call it indie folk, kind of in the same vein as like Lumineers, Mumford & Sons, all those kind of bands. But I discovered them a little bit before that explosion of indie folk, which would eventually show up in the mid-2010s. I particularly loved the song This Old World, which is the closing track off this album. It has this sort of melancholic, reflective sound to it that I just ate up as an emotional teenager.
This old world, this old world.
My sort of interpretation of it, at least in those days, was the idea of growing up and leaving behind a world that you were once familiar with as a kid and moving into a new world as an adult. A bit sappy, if you really think about it, but you know what? I was depressed. Not to mention, this cover here just spoke to me in some way. A person in this massive, flat land overlooking a beautiful sunset. Again, something about that really spoke to me. But I never did own a CD copy of this until fairly recently because, well, I'd forgotten about the song for most of my life and it just popped back into my head one day randomly and I thought, I should really buy that CD. Thankfully, the CD cost me little to no money because the band really didn't get a lot of attention in their time. I love this album. I'm really happy to have this CD, and I highly recommend checking out that song, This Old World. It's very, very good.
To a place that will never
Alright, next up we have something that strays more into cool guy hipster territory. This is an album by a band called Band of Susans. I have this book called Gimme Indie, which collects the supposed 500 essential indie rock albums that everybody should listen to. And I often go back to that book and just look through it to hopefully find something that looks interesting to me in the moment. Over the years I've owned the book. I've found that every time I dive in, there's something that looks intriguing to me that may have not looked intriguing to me initially, which is kind of a beautiful phenomenon to experience because it just shows that my tastes are always shifting. But in that book, they talk about this band and this album specifically, which when I first saw it, I thought the cover looked very cool because it kind of reminded me of My Bloody Valentine's Loveless. And lots of bands have done covers like this one, but within the context of it being an indie rock album made it that much more intriguing. So reading up on it, I found that you could call this sound shoegaze, which again was an appealing thing for me. But overall, I wouldn't call Band of Susans as a whole a shoegaze band. They're another one of those noise rock bands that came about in the New York no-wave scene. The history of them is actually pretty interesting, though. The name comes from the fact that at one point the band had 3 members named Susan, which is weird. But the main dude behind the band studied under composer Rhys Catham and was heavily influenced by his work along with the works of Glenn Branca, which fed into the sort of weird sound that Band of Susans would do. This is the band's 3rd album, which sees them straying more into melodic territory, but it does still have that sort of noisy quality that you would hear in, again, other new wave acts like Sonic Youth and Glenn Branca. But since discovering this album in that Gimme Indie book, I've always been on the hunt for it, and I finally own a copy of it, which is very, very exciting. There's another album of theirs that I am also trying to get, which has been proving rather difficult to find. I know at some point down the line I will get that album, but until then, I have this one, and I enjoy it immensely. It is very, very good. Next up, I have a CD by an artist called Dave Bixby. I don't really know much about this artist or this album in general. The only reason I have it is because my coworker recommended it to me and was speaking very highly of it. And I sampled it before I bought it and found that I quite enjoyed what I heard. I guess I would describe its sound as sort of sleepy, sad, rainy sounding folk music.
I can't even think straight. Nobody knows.
Which sort of brings me to this tangent of cosmic American music, which is something that I love dearly. There's a couple compilations that the Numero group has put out called Cosmic American Music, which I'm very much obsessed with. I've definitely talked about them in previous videos, but if you haven't listened to them, you absolutely should. The idea behind it is folk and country music that sort of has this psychedelic tinge to it. Which, since discovering that term, Cosmic American Music, I have since discovered quite a bit of other artists that fall within that umbrella and have been enjoying their music so much. And I think it's safe to say that this album does fall in that Cosmic American music sound. Granted, again, it's a little more somber sounding, but I also do enjoy somber music. So definitely check the CD out. It is very, very good. And again, it is perfect rainy day music.
By the sun's golden rays.
Next up, I have a reissue of sorts. This is Machine Girl's famous album, Wolf Girl. This is a very exciting CD to own because it is the first time it has been pressed on CD. The album originally released back in 2014 through digital distribution like Bandcamp and whatnot, and it's been pressed on vinyl numerous times, albeit in limited quantities, because I'm pretty sure the band was not signed onto a label. They were just doing everything independently. And naturally, because the music is so chaotic and bonkers, the internet adopted it, and it quickly got a cult following because of it. It's definitely a favorite for all the terminally online freaks who like bands like Death Grips. But I too am also a massive fan of this album, and was really disappointed when I first discovered it that it did not have a CD release. But now here we are in 2025. It just dropped on CD. It even says it's the 10+ year anniversary edition of it, so it's actually got a bunch of bonus content, which is also very exciting. I'm so happy the band finally reissued this on CD and record, and hopefully it is here to stay, and hopefully this does not quickly go out of print and then just skyrocket in price on the secondhand market. Because really, I would want anyone who loves this album to be able to get their hands on it pretty easily. But I think the band is actually now on a label, which is pretty cool, because they also just put out a new album last year, which I know is still in print and still pretty easy to get. So maybe that's the case for this one too. If that's so, get yourself a copy right now, because now you can. All right, next up, I have something a bit esoteric. This is a band called Papermusik. I found this CD in the clearance section, and initially I didn't really think anything of it because the design of this cover, to me, screams generic indie band that no one really cares about. But for whatever reason, it spoke to me enough to actually just put it on and give it a listen, and I found that it's got a very different sound than what I expected. It was a lot more atmospheric and electronic and even kind of borderlining ambient sounding. The best I could compare them to is Stereolab and even some of the more electronica aspects of Yo La Tango. Regardless, I found that I actually really enjoyed what I heard off this, so I grabbed it. What I was able to learn about this band is Papermusik is a side project that features two members from the ambient post-rock band Landing. At the moment, this is the only album the band has released, but it is very, very good. I absolutely recommend that you all check it out. It was a pleasant surprise for me, and I hope if you listen to it, it's a pleasant surprise for you, too. Staying on the topic of esoteric finds, next up I have a really weird one called Mind Alien. Now, this is one I actually am having a hard time coming up with things to talk about it because there's really not a lot of information about it online. This was just another one of those cases where I found the CD in the clearance section, I thought that the cover looked incredible, and I just had to know what it sounded like. It's definitely a DIY type thing because it's packaged in this super cheap envelope thing, and the disc is actually a CDR, which means that the band self-made all of the copies. But what I heard off of this, I just love. It's just very, very good beepy boopy ambient electronica. It's the kind of shit that I adore. The back cover here has a pretty far out description. Infinite realm, one psychic love, one true zone, King Gray looms in the dreamscape, recorder lurched, mind sight phased. This was a find for sure, and I'm happy to have found this because I've tried to look it up on the internet to find places to listen to this. At the moment, I haven't found anything. Maybe while I'm editing this video, I'll do a deeper dive and hopefully leave you all with something so you can listen to it too. But if not, and you happen to find this in the clearance section of your local record store, then just get it. It's a fun listen. Alright, Internet, we are down to the last CD for today, and that is an album by a band called Yura Teikoku. Of course, I have to include at least one Japanese artist in my videos. And talk about internet albums, this is definitely a band adopted by internet music culture. They're a weird Japanese psychedelic band that initially did a lot more abrasive and noisy sounding stuff, but over the years have evolved and changed their sound up a little bit. This album in particular is a lot more pop-oriented, still kind of weird sounding, but easier to digest. And this particular issue of the album is actually a compilation, so it has the album Hallow Me, which is cover that you see here, but it also includes their EP Beautiful, which again I am a sucker for because it just means more content on one disc. So I could not help but to get this version compared to the other version, which just has the Hallow Me track list. I don't really know much else about the band apart from this album and knowing that their early stuff is a lot noisier. At some point I would like to explore the rest of this band's discography, but until then I will enjoy this CD, and I recommend any of you Japanese rock fans out there to check it out if you have not listened to it yet. Alrighty then, Internet, that does it for me. Thank you all so very much for sticking around and watching. Again, I'm hoping to record more videos so I can actually have something to upload within the next couple of weeks. So if you're patient, stay tuned, you'll likely see some stuff being uploaded on the channel. But if you're a new viewer and you liked what you saw, then please consider hitting that subscribe button. It'll show me the support. I'll love your face for it. And again, hopefully I can actually consistently upload stuff for you. And you can also follow me on Instagram for even more music. I post a new album on there semi-frequently, talk a little bit about it, and it gives you a bit of an insight of what else is in my CD collection. Thanks again for tuning in and watching. This is Olin from What I'm Listening To, signing out. Goodbye.